Now for something completely different. Racing has always been about seeing, judging speed, form, fairness, and risk, often in real time. And we'll get to this and what we're seeing with racing in a minute. But I wanted to point out on this slide, we're looking at a telescope. And let's zoom back a little bit. William Herschel, the maker of the finest telescopes in the 18th century. Think Captain James Cook, contemporary. Think around the time when horse racing was starting to light up. He once said, "Seeing is an art which must be learned. The puzzle is whether we can unlearn one way of seeing and acquire another." Racing has been relearning that art, literally, for centuries. Today, the challenge isn't a lack of data. It's whether we're seeing the whole race, or perhaps the entire context of the race clearly and together. This talk's not about faster horses or smarter algorithms. It's about sense-making, how technology helps humans see what was previously invisible. In the 1870s, American horse racing was coming alive. The Kentucky Derby and the Preakness began. And at that same time, in 1872, a simple question shook the emerging racing scene. Do all four hooves ever leave the ground at once? Sounds trivial right now, doesn't it? But at the time, no one could answer it. Not trainers, not jockeys, not scientists. The human eye simply was not fast enough. So Leland Stanford, yes, founder of Stanford University, did something radical. He didn't argue, he didn't regulate, and he didn't guess. He commissioned Edward Muybridge, a British photographer, to build a method and a machine that could reveal what biology could not and change how we see. Racing didn't adopt this mindset. Racing invented it. And I want you to remember that as we think about the heritage of racing. Racing invented new ways of seeing biomechanical insight. Now, I claim no expertise in horse racing, nor do I claim myself an AI evangelist, but I am trained as an anthropologist who has spent 20 years building advanced technology systems. In some ways, I was building the future, and it reminds me of this famous quote by the speculative science fiction writer William H. Gibson. He said, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." So I was building elements of the future in my role at Intel, from building consumer electronics to the Olympic Games to New York Fashion Week to the international scene on sports, health, medicine, crossing fitness and sports ecosystems. The through line in my work, in retrospect, has been consistent. Making the invisible visible. In part through ethnographic research, that's the kind of in-context research an anthropologist does, but studying and understanding people in their context, and in part by enabling technology systems to help out. Across all these domains, I've learned one thing. Data doesn't create insight. Sense-making does. Seeing is a skill, and it still has to be learned quite deliberately. Muybridge gave us proof, the what. His contemporary, Etienne Jules Marais, he pursued the how and the why, rhythm, force, continuity. Racing still rewards finish line outcomes, but safety, integrity, welfare, and trust live in the how and why, not just the results. If we only look at the results, we miss the forces that created them. We see evidence of a shift in this direction when we look, for instance, at sectional timing in Australia. It shifts the conversation a bit from who won to how the race unfolded. Racing today generates extraordinary volumes of data, yet stewarding decisions often remain reactive and fragmented. The issue isn't technology, it's orientation. We still see racing as zoomed out in snapshots, not systems. Each data set lives in its own silo. Performance, welfare, betting, environment. The race exists as a whole, but our data does not. Integrity risks lives in the gaps between the systems. Integrity, it's in those gaps. It makes me wonder, is racing data-rich and somewhat insight-poor? It's something that I was pondering as I came up with this paper. Now, using images from his invention, the chronophotographic gun, it's pretty crazy to think about, Murray transformed athletes into flows, vectors, and relationships over a century ago. He used time-lapse photographs and tracings to explain the technical efficiency of an American hurdler at the 1900 Paris Olympics. On the far right there, you see. Unlike the other competitors, the American took the hurdle with a straight front leg, which at the time was considered both unorthodox and borderline cheating. But the capture of this movement highlighted his innovation, which was previously invisible, which gave new vision to his success. And his methods, of course, are still with us today. They were widely adopted. This is how you hurdle. AI is simply the next step in that lineage, not automation for its own sake, pattern recognition at scale. AI doesn't replace judgment, it extends it, just as photography once did. Integrity and welfare require the Murray view, understanding motion as a system, not a moment. I recently read of a project in Japan that does real-time whip sound monitoring, which is kind of interesting because it also shows how motion, timing, and intent may matter more than post-race discipline. At Intel, we developed 3D athlete tracking, and it wasn't about putting more wearables on athletes. It was about simply extracting structure from what already exists: video, geometry, physics. It didn't interrupt any races or training for that matter. We initially developed it with an eye toward coaching, training, and injury prevention, and has now expanded to broadcast storytelling and even scouting, democratizing access to detailed biomechanical insight to anyone with a smartphone and internet access. Like MyBridge, we're not changing the athlete, and like Murray, we're changing the lens. This allows us to see load distribution, efficiency, micro instabilities without interfering with competition. In doing some research before coming here today, I came across several examples in the equestrian space about similar technologies, markerless computer vision, to understand gait and other biomechanical insights. Making this microscopic information available all matters because it preserves trust. Now, we had been simultaneously zooming in on athletes while also zooming out, doing the research around smart stadiums as microcosms of smart cities, venues, vehicles, weather, operations, spectators, all interacting in real time. When systems are isolated, the decisions behind them are invisible. But we learned that when systems start to connect, accountability emerges naturally, as do gaps in our understandings. Major racecourses across the Asian Racing Federation already function like micro-cities, but are they being visualized and activated this way? Over the course of our 7-year Olympic sponsorship, our digital twins became more and more detailed. From the simple use case of counting people and mapping their flows and dwell times in a venue, we started to map and model stadiums in the world that served athletes, spectators, operations, media, safety, food and beverage, and security. In each case, we're learning to see these places differently, in context and over time. In these examples, we broke down silos for use cases like real-time mapping of roads and spectator access, for safety and transportation, and how different times of day or different weather might impact operations and the field of play. We even built a POC that gamified training in VR for venue general managers, and that's the center video on the left. And this was ahead of the Tokyo Games. The magic in all these didn't come from exotic AI models. It actually came from connecting the mundane: athletes, vehicles, surfaces, weather, infrastructure, operations, in ways that were previously siloed. As digital twins ceased living in isolation and started talking to each other, something changes. Small decisions become visible. Hidden trade-offs start to surface. Accountability improves, and not through enforcement, but through shared context that generates dialogue. This is where trust is built, not in the model, but in the systems around it. Trust improves when context is shared, not enforced. Now, one hard lesson that we learned from the Olympic ecosystem: use cases, they don't generally align neatly with organizational, divisional, or federation timelines. The next challenge isn't necessarily one of innovation. The technologies largely exist. It's about orchestration, aligning systems and stakeholders and timing across the entire life cycle of an event, learning new ways to see and trust together across the silos in our organizations and across our federations. I think that jurisdictions that align pilots with regulatory calendars will probably move faster and break trust less. And that brings us really full circle to the real point of our talk today. You know, as we round the corner, we start to see a little bit of history, a little bit of tradition, and how we're moving forward. Today, we live in that same tension that was captured by that transition from the early work of Muybridge to the work of Murray, by that transition from still photos of the Stanford bet to movement and meaning opened up by Murray's notions of flows and context. We measure everything, yet we often don't understand anything new. When we dare to see this race differently, its parts all in context, rhythm, and flow, we don't just improve outcomes, we strengthen the social contract of the sport itself. Thank you very much.